Alright, welcome to my science tutorial. In today's video, we're going to be talking about plant growth movement. Plant growth movement. Now, plants, how do they move? We know in animals there are things like skeletal system and the muscular system which help animals to move, and that makes plants to seem very passive. But in actual sense, they also move. Yes, plants move. They have some systems in place, even though the movement is restricted to sites like the stem tips and the leaves. Now, today we're going to be looking at the type of movements in plants, and we'll see some, we'll look more into that. So in plants, there are two types of movement. The first one is the growth movement. Growth movement, and the second one is a non-growth movement. Now, the growth movement or the plant's growth movement is referred to as tropism. And the non-growth movement is also referred to as nastic movement. Today we'll be focusing more on growth movement, but before we do that, let's look at the definitions of the two types of movements. Now, like we said, the first type is the growth movement, which is also known as tropism. Now, how do we define that? It says this involves the movement due to stimuli such as gravity, light, touch, water, and chemicals. Gravity, light, touch, water, and chemicals. Now, these things are what we refer to as stimuli. Alright, so the second one is the non-growth movements, and this says that these are movements of certain parts of a plant in response to non-directional stimuli. Well, what that means, we'll be looking at it in some few minutes. Alright, here in the growth movement we saw something like the plant bending towards the sun, over here, and this is what we call the directional movement or unilateral movement or unilateral stimulus coming from one direction, and then we see the plant growing through it. And in contrary to that is what they're trying to state here, that's what in the non-growth movement, the response of the plant is something that is to a non-directional source of stimuli. Alright, what that simply means is that in a non-growth movement, you might have something like we have here is what we call the Venus plant. The Venus plant is a carnivorous plant, and it feeds on insects. So the reaction of this Venus plant to capture insects is also a nastic movement. It is not a growth movement, a nastic movement. So this kind of response to nature, or what is not something that's going to take place over some period of time towards a particular direction, is what we refer to as what non-growth movement. Alright, like I said earlier, today we'll be talking more about the growth movement, so we'll now go ahead and look at tropism. Before we do that, let's take note that these two are not the only forms of nastic movement. We have others like you might heard of the Mimosa pudica, which responds to touch by folding, and then you also see plants like hibiscus flower that closes up when the light is down in the evening, and then there are a lot more. We have things like bursting of seed as a result of change in humidity. They are all examples of nastic movement. Now, tropism. What is tropism? Many a times, if you hear a loud noise, you might respond impulsively by jumping up or doing something reactive. When we have animals responding to stimulus, there is an external stimuli, we're talking about response. So in animal, we're going to say that is a response. What if that happen in plants? We call it tropism. So a lot of time we think of plants to be very passive and not active, but the fact is that they also respond to external stimulus. Alright, so let's look at the definition of tropism. Over I say tropism is defined as the growth or bending movements of an organism, that is, in this case we are talking about plants, in response to an external stimulus such as light, water, or gravity. Now, when it says external stimulus, it is talking about one directional or unilateral, which means it is coming from one direction. Alright. Now, anytime there is a one-directional stimulus, plants will always grow in the direction that will favor it, that is most suitable for it. Okay. Alright, so when we have plants growing towards the source of the stimulus, then that is what we call positive tropism. Positive tropism. So that means it's growing towards stimuli or stimulus. What if it is growing away from the stimulus? That one is called negative tropism. So we call this negative that is away from stimulus. So in our picture here, we see that this plant seems to be growing towards the source of the light, So in this case, our stimulus coming to the plant is what? The light. So having the plant growing towards the light, we say that what? It is having a positive tropism. That means the plant grows towards the source of the stimulus, which is source of the light. That is positive tropism being displayed right here in this diagram. So now let's go ahead and look at the various kinds of tropism that we have. We have a lot more, but in this video we're talking about the 5 main types of tropism. Phototropism. This is talking about the growth movement of plants in response to an external one-directional source of light. Alright, so we can go back to our diagram here again. Having the light coming from this direction, we both say that what our plant is responding to the light. That is what the shoot system. So what about the root? Root always grows away from the source of light. So we'll say that the shoot will say it is what? Positively phototropic. Since we have the roots growing away from the light, we'll say our root system, or let's say root, we'll say it is sort of negatively phototropic. Now, in our previous videos on phytohormones, we talked about the reason why it should grow towards light and the roots away from light. We were talking about auxin, so you can go and check that out to get a better understanding. Alright, what about hydrotropism? Hydrotropism, that's the second type of tropism. This one is a growth movement of plants to respond to an external one-directional source of water. or moisture, one directional source of water or moisture. In this setup over here, we can see there is a porous sand in here, and then we have a container with water. You observe that the dam is being perforated, so the water is gradually coming out. And what observation can you see? You see the roots growing more towards the water, and there is sort a reduced growth over here. Now, what is the cause? We look at that in our previous video. It is caused because the cause is that we know that low oxygen concentration favors root growth. You check that at oxygen, talking about oxygen. When it is low, it favors root growth. But we know that water causes increased concentration of oxygen in the roots. So what's happening is that once we have the water coming out, the side facing the side that is exposed to the water will have high oxygen concentration, while the side with the low oxygen concentration will have cell elongation, because that's what oxygen does. So there will be reduced growth at the side facing the water, and the other side with a low oxygen concentration will increase in length, and that will cause the roots to bend towards the source of water. So when we say low oxygen, that means it will favor root growth. All right. The next type of tropism is what we call geotropism. It is also referred to as gravitropism. So let's put that here. Gravitropism. We can define this as a growth of plant parts in response to the direction of a source of gravity. So, what do you think? Would you say the shoot is positively geotropic, or it is negatively geotropic? Now, remember, the shoot always grows towards the sky, so we'll say that the shoot system is negative geotropic, while the root is positive geotropic, because we have our roots always growing towards the source of gravity. Right away, we see in this setup over here, you can see that the shoot over here is like growing towards the sky, while we have the roots growing downwards. So what happens, we'll say that our shoot is negatively geotropic. So the root is going towards gravity. And then we have the shoot that is going opposite gravity, or let me call it anti. Okay, let's use something now. Let me call it anti gravity. Now the next one is chemotropism. And it is a plant movement to respond to one directional chemical source. A very good example is the movement of the pollen tube growth. Pollen tube growth. Pollen tube growth, it usually grows towards a chemicals or substance that have been secreted by the stigma and the start on the ovule or the embryo sac. So that is a good example of chemotropism. And the last one here is sigmotropism. Sigmotropism can also be referred to as haptotropism. Now, this one is the movement of plants to respond to touch or physical contact. Respond to touch or physical contact. And so this actually results in the curvature, or you see plant tendrils coiling on the hard contact or something that can support the stem, such as the one we are seeing right here in this picture. You can see the tendrils that are being coiled around this pole. So there is a type of Hydrotropism or Sigmotropism. You can see this a lot in other things like morning glory, that is hypomia, and the hypomia tubular. That is one of the plant that exhibits Sigmotropism. Sorry. It is also seen in beans plants. So it's a beans, or let's say morning glory. And other plants that have tendrils. Alright. So these are some major tropisms displayed by a plant, and then we might be looking at more in our next tutorial, so you check it out. And if you like this video, remember to hit the like button and also subscribe to our channel for notification. Thank you.